All right. We're good.
Okay, we'll start all over. Well, thank you for joining me today. This is Miss D Happiness, the Svengati Goddess. And today I have an awesome guest. And I would like you to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you
Introduce
very
yourself.
much for having me on. My name's Jason Rowland. I'm the vice president of the World Series of Comedy. That is North America's largest touring comedy festival. We go to 13 cities a year and put on a contest in each of those cities. And the final one we go to is in Las Vegas in September. And that's where we declare our year-long champion. We just started 2 days ago in Las Vegas with our first event of the year. And all of our preliminary round events are going to wrap up by the end of July. I also run something called comedyfeedback.com, which is a comedy consulting business. And I run classes that run for 6 weeks that help comedians prepare for their showcasing sets and auditions that they would have at a club or to get ready for a contest or a festival like the one that we run with the World Series of Comedy. And I'm a former club manager, so I kind of come to it from the perspective of a booker. And too often, comedians don't get the inside perspective of what bookers are really looking for. So that's what I try and provide. I try and provide a little bit of extra insight that comedians might not know about how to get booked at a club.
And people need that insight. That is beautiful. That is beautiful. But before I answer those questions, that was amazing what you just all that about the World Series of Comedy that everyone needs to know, especially like me, a newbie. We need to know what are the bookers looking for? What can I
So,
critique?
so I think the easiest way to break it down is just to look at the word showcase itself. What are you doing during a showcase? You're showcasing your ability to write and your ability to perform. So when you put together the set that you either want to film and submit to a contest or festival or to a club as an audition, or if you're going live to perform in a contest or to audition for a club, you want to have your best, most well rehearsed material that's 5 or 7 minutes long and filmed very well if it's a film submission. Too often, comedians will just take a 5 minute chunk from a longer form set and submit that. But that's not really your best material. That's just a good chunk from a good set you had. So, showcasing at contests, festivals, and for clubs is a completely separate skill than just going and performing live. What you're really doing is you're spending the 5 or 7 minutes in your audition, whether it's on film or in person, to earn the 25 minutes at a club or the 40 minutes at a club. And so I always really recommend that comedians practice their showcase set, make sure they have 5 minutes down really tight. And those 5 minutes are an exploration of who you are as a person, what your style of comedy is, and how comfortable you are on stage performing it.
Those are some great lessons. I hope I said this guy's name right. Khalez, Kellz.
Okay.
He's one of the 40 comedians that's here. And he was saying, I told him today, like, every day you wake up, you're supposed to learn something. Something. I have learned two things today. He gave me some knowledge, and you're spitting knowledge right now, and it's beautiful. I'm here to learn. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the comedy industry is a supportive industry of those people who behave accordingly within it. It's a really good self-governing industry. If you're not a good person, you don't last very long in comedy. And so it tends to people who are really nice tend to gravitate towards longer careers in comedy. And people are willing to mentor others and share information and just help people getting better because what they want to do is they want to see that the art form and the craft of comedy, of stand-up comedy, is continually being improved and evolved and getting to a better space. And comedy clubs aren't competing against other comedy clubs for the entertainment dollar. They're competing against bowling alleys and movie theaters and golf courses. And so the comedy industry in general is very supportive and insular and supportive of each other within it. So I'm glad that you've had two good experiences already today, and I hope that you have many more in the future.
I usually attract good people around me, so it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Can we just go back? Can you say your generation again?
Sure, yeah, no problem. I'm Gen X. I was born in 1971. I turned 50 51, I guess, last year. I'm going to turn 52 this year. That's just a weird number to me. I feel like I'm about 27, you know. My knees don't, but the rest of my body does.
We all feel that way. I'm sorry, I won the race. I'm a year older than you.
No
I
way.
hate winning that race.
Well, I don't know if you're going to end up broadcasting this just audio only or video, but I can see you on video, and you could shave 15 to 20 years off of that real easy. So
thank you so much.
You're holding yourself well for a fellow Gen Xer.
Thank you so much. Plenty of water. That's all. And vitamins.
Well, one of my friend's kids turned 19, which is the legal age where I live in Vancouver, BC in Canada. And I gave him a birthday card, and I said, there's 3 keys to life. Moisturize daily, be kind to others, don't tailgate when you drive. Everything else is great. If you can do those 3 things, you're going to have a good life.
And that is true. I'm going to go back a little bit with some of the questions. I do apologize. We were trying to take, but technical difficulties.
Oh, but, you don't have to let them know this is take 2. This is take 1. We did it perfectly before.
But you know what? My podcast is known for not editing, so that's why I don't want to edit. I'm just like raw and uncut.
I appreciate the transparency. That's funny.
Thank you. What made you choose on becoming, you said a comedian. So what made you choose on being a comedian and then going to being the president of the World Series of Comedy?
Well, I've never performed stand-up myself, but
okay.
I've been involved in the stand-up community for over a dozen years. I'm the former general manager of the Comedy Mix in Vancouver. That was one of North America's premier comedy clubs. It had international touring headliners performing every week. I worked there for a number of years and developed a lot of the techniques that I use for comedyfeedback.com now in terms of helping comedians showcase themselves in a good light to be booked by a booker. And as I was transitioning away from working at the Comedy Mix, a friend of mine owned the World Series of Comedy Festival. I've known him for probably 16 or 17 years. That's Joe Lowers, and he's the CEO of the World Series of Comedy. And I told him that I was stepping away from the Comedy Mix just to have a little bit more flexibility with my time. The hours being a general manager of a comedy club are very intensive. And I like the freedom of traveling around to different cities, and I like the freedom of having a different work schedule and not having to worry about whether or not we have enough straws or limes on a particular night. So I ended up getting into the festival, and I've worked with it since 2017. And so that was my transition from general manager and booker of a comedy club into head judge and vice president of the comedy festival.
Okay. So I heard that you didn't have enough straws for the comedians?
No, I was trying to make a little joke. Like one of the things that happens, comedians don't realize this, and this is a good lesson for comedians, is comedians don't realize how much time a booker has to spend on other aspects of running a club than just booking the club. And so as an example, I would probably work a 50 or 60 hour work week, and I might dedicate 2 hours of that 60 to booking. And so one of the keys that comedians need to keep in mind is whomever is booking that club, especially if they're also the showroom manager or the general manager of the club, has to worry about silly things like the inventory on straws and limes, and worry about whether you have enough vodka and Bud Light, and whether you're fully staffed, and if anyone's out sick, or developing policy and procedure manuals, or actually running the showroom for 23 and a half hours a week while the show is on. And so the amount of time that a booker has dedicated to actually booking the club is very, very restricted. And so my advice when a comedian is trying to contact a club to try and get paid work is 2 things. 1, be very mindful that the booker is probably very, very busy. 2, be mindful that there's probably 1,000 other comics, and that's not an exaggeration, 1,000 other comics looking for work at that same club. So 3, what you should do is you should contact them very friendly at first and ask them what the best way to communicate with them is, and what the best day of the week to communicate with them is, and how frequently to follow up. Just to give you an example, the day I left the Comedy Mix, I had a inbox folder in my email program that was labeled comedians looking for work. It had 1,280 comedians looking for work. There's only 156 spots a year available for work. More than half of them were going towards locals or returning acts. So you're looking at maybe 50 spots over the course of a year and 1,200 and something people looking for it. So you're going to be facing about a 97 or 98% rejection rate, regardless of your talent. So one of the things you want to do is remove any reason for a booker to dismiss you from consideration for booking. And that's why I work with Comedy Feedback to try and help comedians present themselves in their best light. You would be surprised how many comedians submit a video that has really poor technical aspects to it, like poor audio or poor video, or is edited poorly, or is handheld. Like, there's so many tips that we give to comedians asking for notes at our festival that literally just start with: buy a tripod, film and landscape, make sure you place the camera somewhere where the audio isn't being muddled by other comedians speaking or the staff speaking or a door opening and shutting. You want to give yourself every opportunity to showcase your performing and writing style with no distractions. And so that's kind of what I was getting at with that little joke about the limes and the straws, is that a booker is very, very busy, and not necessarily just with the booking aspect of the club. So you need to cater how you present yourself to them, and also cater the manner in which you communicate with them. And those are the two most important aspects to trying to get paid work.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, I'm learning something today. Oh my God, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. And you know what? And it's just solidify what I just received in my email. And you are right. The World Series of Comedy and the people that are behind you are the judges. I did apply. I'm not there yet. And I did apply. I did send a video, and they gave me their critiques. And I appreciate it, and I will see you guys in a couple of years. And I will take what they have told me and put it to work, make it.
And that's the perfect attitude to have. Like, the best comedians are the comedians that are self-aware and willing to be critical of themselves and know that what they want to do is improve so that they can have these opportunities at clubs. The one thing I would say is, like, don't put us on hold for 2 years. Come to the main event. Even if you don't qualify for any of the satellite events, the main event of the World Series of Comedy is basically like a job fair and a comedy conference, and also something you've mentioned 2 or 3 times today, an educational opportunity, because we run daytime seminars where we talk about professional development as a comedian. I do a set construction seminar on how to build the set you want to use as your showcase. There's comedians who will come and talk about the finances of working on the road. We do 2 or 3 Q&As with industry insiders like club bookers. So you can literally ask the question you want of the person who owns Laughs Unlimited in Sacramento. What's the best way for me to get booked? Do you have days I can come down and showcase in person? For comedians, from a perspective of a booker, getting an in-person showcase is the number one way to get booked at a club. So then you work your way backwards from that. How can I get an in-person showcase? Well, one, go to networking events like the World Series of Comedy. We have 150 comedians show up at the end of September every year in Las Vegas. That's 150 new comedy friends that you have scattered around the country who can vouch for you for one of those live showcases. It also might be a couch you can crash upon, or someone you become friends with. So if you both get into our satellite event in New Orleans, you can share a hotel room together. Plus, we also bring in industry. We had the head booker for Carnival Cruises at our festival last year. We had the owner of APCA, which is a college booking entity. One of the clients he found at our main event 2 years ago ended up being booked for 37 college shows within a week of leaving our festival. He had those booked with this gentleman from APCA.
Wow.
It was about $52,000 or $53,000 of gigs just by coming to our festival. And then by going to those gigs and doing well, and through word of mouth of doing well at those gigs, he got asked to open for Bert Kreischer, who's like an international touring headliner. And so, great opportunities for yourself.
Wow.
I'm sure that especially with the tag that you use for your name and your podcast, you understand that the luckiest people in the world are those that work the hardest. And so come to the main event. I'm inviting you personally to come to the main event, please. But your listeners on the podcast who haven't registered yet for the World Series of Comedy, come to the main event, even if you don't get into the top 101. So the top 101 are the contestants from whom we choose the champion for the year. But we also, as a festival, understand that there's more than 101 great comedians in North America that are signed up to our festival. So we want to give them equal opportunity for the daytime seminars, the networking events, to hang out with industry, to meet other comedians, and also stage time. So what we do is we pay for additional stage time for those comedians so that they can showcase their act, just like all the people that are in the contest portion. So last year we had to add 3 shows so that 45 more comedians who showed up to the main event, even though they weren't in the contest, could perform live for the bookers. And those people leverage those performances into paid work or live showcase or live auditions at people's clubs. So the main event is where it's at for our festival. The preliminary satellite events are kind of like bonuses, and they're harder to get into because only 40 people get into them.
Right. Okay. Well, you heard that, listeners. We need to be there. And I was going to be there. Like I was.
Great.
I couldn't make it. But I couldn't make it last year because I had a job, and now comedy is my job. So
that's great.
Oh yes, I'm in it. Thank you. And so I will be there in September, and I'm gonna tap you on your shoulder. I'm gonna be like, "Excuse me, hello."
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, hair won't be like this. It probably be something different, but remember the face.
We're friends now. We're friends. Just as you mentioned, job, just something that popped in my head. A lot of comedians obviously have to transition from comedy being a hobby to being a vocation to being an advocation. So in the portion when it's a vocation, you're still working part-time and also doing comedy part-time. As a tip from a booker, never admit you have another job on stage, even if it's true. So if you have a great work story you want to turn into a joke, put it in the past tense. Keep the truth to it, but put it in the past tense. So when I used to work at XYZ company, as opposed to I also work at XYZ company. And the reason for that is the audience comes to every show with the default mindset that the show is populated with 100% full-time professional comedians. You and I know that that's not always the case. People that work within the comedy industry know that that's not always the case, but the public perception is that. So they automatically give command and attention and respect to these comedians because they realize that the club or the venue that they're attending the show at has booked these people on purpose. So anytime that you say you're also working part-time, you kind of reduce your own command over the audience or authority over the audience as a full-time comedian. So when you're putting together your showcase set, and if you have a joke about your job there, just a real quick tip from someone who used to book a club, put that joke in the past tense. You don't have to change anything else about the joke. The punchline can be the same. The setup and the premise and the tags and the throwaway lines can be the same. Just change the tense so that the audience thinks you used to have to work and now you're a full-time comedian.
And you know what? You must have been the one that critiqued me too, because that's exactly what they told me. I had a joke in there, and it was talking about the job I used to have because I got fired after that.
Right.
After that set. So yes, you're right. And after I did that video, I was thinking in my head, I have to start saying where I used to work at because 2 weeks later I got fired, but it's okay. I'm a comedian. I'm a full-time comedian
right
now.
And even if you have to do some kind of like gig economy job moving forward, Uber Eats, whatever it might have to be to help support your comedy as you move towards earning enough revenue to support yourself, still keep that job in the past tense, even if it's a current job for you. It just helps keep the curtain
I understand.
and the facade for the audience.
It makes sense. It really does make sense. I'm just gonna hit a couple of key points because I know you have a busy day and you had just a certain amount of time and we had a lot of hiccups. So I'm gonna try to condense this a little bit. But I'm gonna go back to this one. Is there anyone you can say that you mimic or took a liking to that shaped you to who you are today?
I think probably like the two biggest are my mom and dad.
Mhm.
They're both very free-spirited people, not hippies or anything like that, but they're both the only people from their immediate family that moved away from the city that their immediate family was based in. They're the only ones who like traveled the world extensively as they were still young. And they've also had multiple jobs throughout their careers. My dad has been an accountant, a registered nurse, and a guidance counselor. My mom has been a librarian and a school principal. And so I think you and I discussed previously about being Gen Xers. I think one of the things about the Gen Xers is we're sort of the first generation that felt you didn't have to keep the same job your whole life. You could move around a little bit and follow your aspirations and your dreams. And so I think my parents provided not only real good real life example of that, where they were able to make a number of transitions. Like as an example, when I was 12, my parents just decided we were going to move to the Caribbean for 5 years. And so we did. And so we all uprooted, and I lived in the Cayman Islands for 5 years, went to high school there before I moved back to Canada and went to university. And it was an amazing experience. And so I think their open-mindedness just through osmosis kind of translated to me. I'm not risk averse at all. I'll take a lot of risks. And so like working full-time in comedy is a bit of a risk, and giving up a brick and mortar job is a bit of a risk. So I think they were a really great foundation of an example of how I could live my life. Plus they were also very supportive. So they provided the really good example, and they also raised me in a way where I knew I was supported in all of my choices. And then a kind of sad but silver lining example is my grandfather and grandmother realized they wouldn't have enough money to retire. So my grandmother went to work at age 40 and worked for 25 years straight. They didn't spend a dime of her money so that they could save it up as an investment for their retirement fund to finally travel and see the world. They were both Italian. They'd never been to Italy, that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, 6 months after my grandmother retired, my grandfather, who had retired 5 years earlier from working on the railroad his whole life, passed away. So they only had this 6 months. So they built up 25 years, hoping to spend 25 years together retired, but only had 6 months. And so for me, that was a real life experience where it's like, I don't want to save stuff for the end. I want to live today,
now,
and then tomorrow, and then the day after that, and try and be as present as I can in my life. And so if that means I make a few mistakes, so be it. I've always had the attitude where absolute worst case scenario, I'll go wash dishes at a Wendy's or a McDonald's and I can get by in life. I'd like to explore other opportunities, but that opportunity is there. And so I've never felt uncomfortable in making odd choices. And so I think that comes from my parents and grandparents. So I think they're the biggest influence for me.
that is beautiful. That is beautiful. I mean, they're real people. Some people are talking to people they can't even touch. You know, it's in a magazine. You know, that's not real, but that's real. Beautiful, beautiful foundation. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Do you believe it's something inside of a comedian that they must have to be successful in comedy?
I think there's two ways to answer that question. I think you could have someone who doesn't have that X factor, which I think is kind of what you're alluding to, could still be a successful comedian, but I think they would probably have a ceiling. Like, I think you could give someone who doesn't have that extra spark as a performer.
I alluded to you.
Sorry?
Okay.
Oh, did you freeze up there for a second? I think you're back. You can hear me all right, right?
I think you've been freezing all the time, but it's okay. I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. Fine. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm on hotel Wi-Fi. So
I just feel like this. I'm like.
So I guess to answer the question about whether or not you have to have a spark to be a comedian, not really. There's people who could go on to be what within the industry would be called like a road dog. They could just have created 40 minutes of material that works every single night, but they don't really push themselves to come up with original things, or they don't tap into their personal life too much, but they have jokes, they understand joke structure, and they can perform jokes, and they're good. But I think you're talking about greatness. And with greatness, you kind of need to have the X factor where you're really willing to be open, honest, vulnerable, tap into personal stories. I think the direction that stand-up comedy is going towards right now is less about, okay, let me sit down and think of what a funny joke would be, and more, let me explore my life and let the audience help me find where the funny parts are. The real key to a developing comedian is to go to an open mic with a mindset that that's their workshop. That's where they need to put in the work to figure out what jokes will work, how to reformat jokes so that they resonate better. And the person you're trying to make laugh at an open mic is the 1 or 2 paid customers that are there, not the 15 comedians at the back of the room. So the focus then of the open mic is to get better. It's not to win the open mic. And far too many comics that are in that kind of bubble of developing but haven't gotten to the stage where they're getting auditions or guest spots at clubs is they're focused too hard on being the best person at that open mic, as opposed to using the open mic for its purpose, which is to get better at comedy. And so I've seen you perform. You have really wonderful charisma on stage. You tap into personal stories. And I think all you need is a little bit of direction in terms of like, oh, I'm getting affirmation that my personal stories work. Let me tap way more into that. And so every time that you would start a new premise that has an I statement or a me statement, so that the viewer or the audience member knows that it's going to be a very personal story about you, that's when they get excited. That's when they lean in. That's when they engage. And so the real key to comedy nowadays, because during the pandemic, the general public watched a lot of comedy on Netflix and on specials and on YouTube, and they got way more knowledgeable than they used to be 5 years ago. So they understand the process of comedy. They really understand setup, punchline, tag. So they understand the mechanics of comedy. So now they're listening to be interested in what that particular comic has to say to them. And so what I think now the new wave of comedy is addressing the why during your performance. Why is the joke I'm telling important to me? If I can convey that either through a statement before I tell the joke or in the context of how I do the premise and the setup of the joke, if the audience knows why it's important to me, by proxy, it will become important to them. And that's where you increase your relatability and your engagement with the crowd. Comedians don't need to ask the crowd a question as a permission to talk about a topic. Just go straight into the topic and let the audience know why it's important to you. You can talk about being married in front of an entire crowd of singles as long as you can showcase to those people watching that the topic you're talking about is important to you. So comedians don't need to go, are there any married people in the crowd? Just go into the material about being married, because as long as you write it in a way that's interesting to anyone who can relate to it, then you don't need that permission from the audience to explore the subject. And so when I work with comedyfeedback.com, one of the things I focus on is something that I call the 7 deadly sins on stage. The 7 things you don't want to do while you're on stage because it's a red flag to a booker or it disrupts the flow of your set. And so you want to avoid the unnecessary shout out, panders, give it up for, that's the MC's job. If you're not the MC that night, if you're just there for your guest spot, do your material, go straight into your material. If you walk up to the stage, you grab the mic out of the mic stand, put the mic away, and get right into a personal story, the bookers are like, thank you. Thank you. I don't have to wait for 45 seconds for you to start telling me something about yourself. Avoid, questions as premise intros. Just be confident that the premise you're talking about is going to be interesting to the people watching. You don't need to go like, did anyone drive here today? Or is anyone from New York? Who's watched Avatar? None of those questions are going to change the set that you've written down to tell. Like if you go, has anyone watched Avatar? And no one says yes, then now you're dealing with dead space. And are you going to change your set? No, you're still planning to tell a joke about Avatar. So there's these little hints and corrective measures that comedians can put into place to focus more of the attention during the performance on the actual written material and the prepared material. The LA Comedy Club that we perform at for the main event here in Las Vegas is well known as a gregarious club, I guess is a good way to put it. It's in Vegas. They have an all-you-can-drink special, so it gets a little loud in there at times. But the owner still isn't a fan of crowd work because the ownership can't judge the quality of a comedian based on the crowd work. They can only judge the quality of the comedian based on their prepared work, because that one crowd work moment can't be captured in a bottle and recreated every single show. It was just a moment, an instant, lightning in a bottle. But the way that a booker can tell whether or not they should give someone 25 minutes of stage time is if they can capture the full attention of an audience for 7 minutes based on their prepared material. And so that's another thing that for comedians to keep in mind is that when you do showcase, just focus on paid material. You don't need to do crowd work. It's not helping you any, and it's taken away from the stage time you have to impress the real audience when you're doing an audition, which is the owner of the club or the booker of the club or the judge you're sitting in front of. I know it's counterintuitive to say, don't pay attention to the 150 people in the crowd, but if you're filming a showcase set, you're really just performing to the camera in that moment.
I appreciate that. And people that my audience is going to appreciate that too, because the newbies, we need to hear that. But I have one question, and I know you have to go. You're a busy person. But my question is this. Do you think, because I've been on the scene for a short time, but hearing the same exact joke every night or the 4 open mics I go to, why don't you do something different? Like write something new, write some new stuff.
I love you said that. I love so much about the statement you just said. That should be, if you're doing like a 10-second clip promoting this podcast, that should be the 10-second clip. I call that comedy checklist comedy. Like, why 2 years ago did all of a sudden people start talking about eating other people's butts? Or like 4 years ago, people were talking about eyebrows. Or 6 years ago, people were talking about dollar stores. Like, why does a comedian feel they need to be homogenous to the expectations of the open mic scene? A booker wants to hear something original. As part of the festival, I watch over 700 videos a year. Do you know how many Tinder jokes I've heard? Do you know how many versions of Christian Mingle I've heard? Do you know how many versions of Jew Date I've heard? Or Tinder jokes or Bumble jokes? If you're going to talk about a very common subject, and I suggest that you try to avoid it, but if you do end up talking about it, your punchline has to be so original that a booker is like, wow, that's a new take on dollar stores or marriage, or the difference between ethnicities or genders or trans issues, or anything that's like overly common. You need to be as original as possible in your setup and your delivery. And so one of the suggestions that I make when I'm teaching with comedyfeedback.com is that a comedian steps back and takes a third person objective look at their own material. And the 2 questions that they ask, the first one that's most important is, am I the only comic that can tell this joke? And the more you can answer yes to that, the better it is. Because you don't want to have a generic joke in your set, but you do want to have a joke that is memorable to you. Because when you come to the main event, or you go to Big Pine, or you go to the Seattle International Comedy Festival, and there's 100 comics there, if you can walk up to a booker and mention your joke and that be memorable, they might not remember your name, but they'll remember your joke. And then by remembering your joke, they'll get to know you and then remember your name. And then the second piece of advice I have for a comedian when they're writing out their showcase set is, at the end of every single joke, ask yourself, does the audience think I'm the same person I was, personality-wise, point of view on life, that I was at the end of the previous joke? And then that should be consistent all the way through. Because one of the things that developing comedians, so those who are probably like under 4 or 5 years worth of experience, one of the challenges that they face is that they try and cram as many different styles so that they can showcase their ability to write in different ways. But then it feels like a real roller coaster when you're watching it. You should really try and aim to be like very consistent stylistically, very consistent from your point of view. Like, there's a lot of comedians who accidentally contradict themselves on stage. They'll talk about dating, and then later on in their set, they'll talk about being married or having a long-term spouse or significant other. And it's like, okay, which one of those is true? And then why didn't you explain the transition from dating to being in a relationship? And so anytime that a booker is sitting there in the back of the room evaluating your performance, they shouldn't be questioning whether what you're saying is true. Everything you say on stage should have an element of authenticity to it and be believable. Okay. You can construct something that maybe didn't exactly happen. You can exaggerate stuff, but it still needs to be authentic enough for a booker to think, okay, yeah, that's true. I believe that, because you wouldn't believe the number of times I've been sitting at the back of a room with a panel of 8 or 12 judges at the main event, and you just hear murmurs where they're like, that didn't happen. That's not true. That didn't happen.
Right.
That's not true. And so now what the booker remembers about you is the number of times you lied on stage to the audience, not any of your material, not any of your jokes, not your name. One last quick piece of advice for comedians that's a real trick to use, especially in a filmed showcase, is write a joke about your name, because you get to say it again in the film showcase. And write a joke about your name where you get to say your name a few times. Especially if you either have a memorable name or you go by a stage name or something like that. One of my coworkers, his last name is Kousgaard. He'd been in comedy for 7.5 years before I met him. I asked him if he had a joke about Kousgaard, and he said no. And I'm like, you have such a unique name that's kind of hard for people to remember. Why don't you tell a joke that will let people remember your name? And so the very next day he had written a joke, and he goes, Kousgaard. Okay, it sounds like someone who has to guard cows. And then he came up with a joke about, when his family came to Ellis Island, they got shipped to Omaha to be security people for the cows that are out there. They're cows guards. And so it's a silly joke, but it gets him a chance to say his name on stage, gets a chance for people to understand the correct pronunciation of his name, and also ties into a personal story. And then that story opens up an opportunity for him to talk about his parents or his grandparents and stuff. So it created this connective tissue, but it also gave an opportunity for him to brand himself in his filmed and live showcasing.
Okay, wow. I'm telling you, I'm just learning. I feel like I'm paid for a class right now. I'm sorry. But just for
I'll send you an
laughs,
invoice.
I know. What's that?
I'll send an invoice.
This is thousands and thousands of dollars.
No. $4.
Since you are, way up there, vice president, what are some things you do to relieve intense or stressful days?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I was never a massage person. And then for my 30th birthday, my girlfriend at the time gave me a sports massage. And I was like, this is going to be stupid. And I went, and it was literally the best, top 10 experiences of my life. And so now as an adult, my Disney World is like fancy spas. I'll go in and I'll we're filming this from Las Vegas right now, and Qua Spa and Rancho Spa at Palazzo are really great. Even just like the Imperial Day Spa, the Korean Day Spa off of Sahara is fantastic. So if I'm feeling a little stressed, I will invest $100 or $150 and go get like a full, proper, licensed massage therapist massage. Not some five and dime sketchy place, but I'll go to like the proper place. Like Qua Spa is amazing. It has
massage?
It has a Roman baths and steam rooms and saunas and jacuzzis. And so that's how I spoil myself and how I de-stress. Right. And just to let you know, I drove here from Vancouver, which is about 22 hours total. I broke it up by stopping in Reno on the way. And Reno has two fantastic spas, Peppermill Spa and Atlantis Spa. And I went for a massage on my way driving to Vegas. So that's how I relieved my stress of driving down. So yeah, that's 100%. Like, I don't even put any other percentage to any other de-stressing thing. That's my de-stressing.
Oh my.
I golf a little, but I'm a big sports fan. But yeah, spas are where it's at. Mm-hmm. Treat yourself.
That's okay.
Oh, am I freezing up again? We're having the most fun
Well,
here.
that's a good
Freezing and unfreezing.
that's a good way to relieve stress.
Yeah. Oh my! It's the best way. I go to massages so frequently in Las Vegas that I have a regular licensed
No,
massage
a
therapist.
massage is great. No, a massage is great in Mandalay Bay, and I do believe not Aria, but Mandalay Bay. Mandalay Bay has a beautiful massage place.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Maybe I'll check that one out.
Oh, okay. I think it's the internet here.
Oh,
Okay. What's your favorite color?
blue. Yeah, that's a quick one.
Who?
It's always been
I'm like,
blue.
what color is that? What's your favorite color?
Blue.
I think we froze.
I think we froze too.
That's technology. And I told you I don't edit. Thank you so much. It was just the internet.
Yeah, we're back.
We're back.
Blue
We're about to wrap this up.
Blue is my favorite color.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's probably my blue, and what, like sky blue, dark blue?
I would probably go somewhere just dark,
Sky blue?
just darker
Oh my
than ocean,
God.
maybe.
Okay. I'm really serious. Got two questions. Do you like animals?
Oh yeah, I used to have 2 cats as an adult,
Do you like
and
animals?
I had
Oh,
a dog as a kid that I loved. But I've decided that I
okay.
travel so much.
Okay, and the cat, was it like a baby Brian?
I had 2 of them, and they were Grace and Kramer. And
Mm-hmm.
I travel so much. I think it's unfair to have pets right now. So if I settle down a little bit more, I'll probably grab pets again.
Okay. Are you? I think you said this, but are you in a relationship?
Nope, super single. So have your listeners contact me.
Okay, well, what's wrong with you?
What's wrong with me is that that's usually the first question on a first date. And it's one I don't like answering. I don't know. I've just always been a pretty independent person. And there's a few times I got real close to settling down and it just didn't happen. So I don't know. I'm open to it. I'd still like to become a dad.
Ooh, that's what you're looking for. Because the next question was, what are you looking for in the person, the significant other that you're looking for? You want someone to bear children.
Well, not in a misogynistic way, but in a co-parenting and loving and supportive relationship way. But I would say I probably would like someone who's as independent as me. So I could be on the road for 14 days and there's a lot of level of trust both ways. And they like their free time just as much as I do. Some common interests. Like I really like the way my brain works. I like to play games, like card games, board games. I like sports. So I like activity. I like going out and walking. During the pandemic, I took up photography. And so just someone who would find some similar interests, but also enough independent interests that they could be well entertained on their own free time.
I understand that. So you're going to marry a pilot.
Oh, hey.
I'm putting that out into the universe. Or a doctor. You know, they are busy.
I'll get a t-shirt made so the next time I walk through an airport, it's like single and looking for a pilot.
You're going to get one.
With the little female symbol there, just so there's no confusion.
You are going to get that. Tell the listeners, because we're wrapping this up. Tell the listeners, you did tell about the World Series of Comedy. Is that this going to be this whole entire week for the World Series of Comedy?
Yeah, so in Las Vegas, our Las Vegas event runs from started on Monday, which was a couple of days ago at the time of recording, and runs through to Saturday the 18th, 7 p.m. every night at the Oyo Resort, which used to be the Hooters Resort next to Tropicana on Trop and Las Vegas Boulevard. And there's a showroom in there called the Vegas Stand Up and Rock Showroom, and that's where we're holding our event. Next week, we're going to be in San Diego on Wednesday and Thursday, and Los Angeles on Friday and Saturday. Then we take a few weeks off. Then we go to Kentucky and New Orleans. Then we take a couple weeks off, and we go to, I think, we go to Sarasota, Florida, then Atlanta. Then after that, Sacramento and Phoenix. Then after that, we go to Minnesota and Texas, and then we wrap up with Boston and Detroit. So we're going through increasingly higher murder rates. That's what we're doing. We're trying to survive the first half before we get killed at the end of the year. Although I hear Detroit's lovely now.
A little rough, but those are a little rough areas, but you'll survive. You'll be okay.
Yeah, I hope so. And if not, there'll be a vacancy for the World Series of Comedy vice presidency if I don't survive through Boston and Detroit.
No, don't put that in the universe. No, don't put that in the universe. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine.
I hope so. Why? I have to meet that pilot.
Yeah, you are gonna meet that pilot. You keep flying. Well, you gotta get out the car. You gotta take the plane, not your car.
Yeah,
you gotta get the.
I'm only driving to this 2-week cycle, and then the 2-week cycle of Sacramento and Phoenix. But other than that, I'll be flying around the country. So I'll put the vibes out there in the airport, and I'll follow up with you. I'll let you know in September if it worked.
All right. Okay. You might.
I need the misty happiness, good vibes.
Yes. You might see me on Saturday. I'll try to stop by Oyo.
Oh, cool.
I didn't know something going on. So 7:00 on Saturday?
Yeah. Just send me a message. I'll put you on the guest list.
Okay, me and my husband will be down there this Saturday.
Cool.
And we're gonna wrap this up. And thank you, Jason, for giving us this quality time from this little podcast, Miss D Happiness, the Svengali Goddess. And you can listen to this on Anchor, Spotify, Radio Public, or wherever you listen to your podcast. And we want to give a special thanks to the givingwater.org for sponsoring us. They do have a water challenge. If you take the challenge, make a donation, whatever you like, and then repost it and have your friends do the same thing. It's for a good cause. It's Hydrating America. Thank you and have a blessed day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to end the broadcast.